The end of live service is here, folks. No, I'm just kidding, but it definitely isn't looking too great. Also, before I get into this, my YouTube stats tell me that roughly 50% of my viewers aren't subscribed to my channel, so, you know, hit that sub button, help your boy out, hit the like while you're there. Anyway, so as I usually do, I pay attention to the news as best as possible. Well, not the actual news that would make me a responsible adult, but the news relating to video games. And I've seen quite a few headlines in a very similar vein over the last couple of weeks, and I'm wondering if we're starting to see a bit of a shift. So in the last couple of weeks, there's been a number of announcements of live service games being shut down. It could be a coincidence that it's all happening at the same time, but let me work through the list. We've got Apex Legends Mobile and Battlefield Mobile from EA, which that is kind of understandable in a lot of ways anyway, because the console counterparts already exist, and maybe they just see it as, you know, not worth pumping the money into these mobile versions anymore, so fine. Another one that you've probably heard of was the Avengers game from Square Enix, which I could talk for hours upon hours about how that was such a missed opportunity. I wasn't terribly surprised that this was getting shut down, but I suppose I'm a little surprised that it's getting shut down so soon. Crossfire X is also in that list, which is the big shooter that launched early last year on Xbox and Game Pass and all of that stuff. Now, I'm not hugely familiar with the franchise. I think Crossfire is super popular over in China, and it's worked its way over here by way of Remedy, who kind of helped get that campaign and the multiplayer mode up and running over here, but it's not done too well. And now that's also being shut down after its, I wouldn't say big launch, but I mean, you know, they dedicated a considerable amount of time to it at one of their like E3 showcases, so they clearly were putting some effort behind it. So that's getting shut down as well. Again, not a huge surprise because I don't know a single person who plays Crossfire. So where it gets really interesting for me is the next three that recently announced that they'll be shutting down. So the next game we have is Knockout City, which is the dodgeball game. Very fun. From what I understand, the launch of that one on Game Pass and the EA Play stuff like that kind of helped boost up the numbers. I can only assume that the player base has dwindled to a point where it's just not worth the effort anymore. But I actually enjoyed it. Me and my friends played it for some time. We lost a lot, but we had a good time while doing it. So Knockout City didn't come out too long ago. That game is roughly 18 months old, and now they're announcing that it's done, or they're going to be shutting it down later this year. Rumbleverse also goes into that, which is the wrestling-themed battle royale, which launched in August of last year. I mean, it technically launched in August of last year. I want to say it was in beta for quite a long time. Before that, you're talking about its proper release roughly 6 months ago. And now it's already going into, okay, we're shutting this down for whatever reason it didn't work out. The big one in here for me is Back 4 Blood, which is the spiritual successor to Left 4 Dead, co-op zombie shooter made by a lot of the people who worked on the original Left 4 Dead games, if I'm not mistaken. Which is also, I don't think it's being shut down. They're not going to be making any more DLC or new content or anything for it, and they're just going to move right on to their next game. And again, Back 4 Blood came out, late 2021, I think it was? So not even 2 years old, and it's kind of a wrap. So if one or two of these stories pop up, then I'm not really paying too much attention to this. But with the number of them that have popped up, especially as we kind of come towards the end of the financial year, I don't know if that plays into it, and all of the stuff that's been going on recently in terms of people being let go from a variety of companies in just tech in general. Sort of layoffs in the thousands, sometimes in the tens of thousands. It is very clear that a lot of companies out there, everybody is shaping up and gearing up for some tough economic times. Everybody is, with the best of respect to everybody that has been let go so far, everybody seems to be trimming any bit of fat that they can possibly, they're not even trimming fat, they're just chopping limbs off at this point. Whether it's entire departments or entire teams, there's a lot of movement going on right now. So obviously the sunsetting of all of the games that I just mentioned, they could be explained away with completely normal, logical, understandable reasons. Avengers was kind of like a mess from the start, so it never really built up the big player base that it needed to, or at least never retained them. I think everybody bought that game and then discovered how repetitive it was and then gave up. Myself included. Knockout City, another one which was fun, but the player base was never quite there, and I speak from experience because the longer me and my friends played that game, the worse our experience got. And what I mean by that is that Knockout City's player base bled so much, they were losing players at such a rate that the only people left on that game were the people who were playing it non-stop. And then you had a few people like ourselves who only got the opportunity to play it every now and again, and you would jump online, get destroyed 3 or 4 times, and then go, oh, okay, let's go play Warzone. So that one, again, completely understand. Rumbleverse, although I intended to check it out, I never got round to it. I heard a lot of buzz, and there was a lot of people in my, internet social circles that were chatting about it during its release, and even leading up to release, and how fun it was and how great it was, but didn't hear too much after. So again, I can only assume that the player base bled out of that one. As I said earlier, Apex Legends and Battlefield Mobile, they've already got the console versions, like, who needs them? Crossfire X never really popped off over here like it did in China. Is what it is, gotta go. Back 4 Blood is a bit of a surprising one, but maybe they've made all of the content they wanted to make and now they're just done. These can all be, all of these games can be explained away in, like I said, some normal, logical, understandable fashion. But when you group them all together in the same span of time, it starts to paint a picture. But also in this time period, there was stories from what's going on at Ubisoft. Stuff like, Skull and Bones has been delayed for the 18th time. The stuff mixed in with that news was the cancellation of roughly 12 games in total. And within those 12 games, I think 3 or 4 of them were live service games. Completely cancelled, done, wiped out, gone. Now, as I said earlier, this could all be explained away for, financial reasons as they sort of restructure and reshape and get ready for whatever recession is coming or is already here. But I'm wondering, and a little bit hoping, if we're maybe starting to see the end of live service games. I'm wondering if people are starting to shift away from that type of game. I mean, everybody had their crack at it. Everybody took their shot at the live service stuff. Ever since, Fortnite and Warzone and all that stuff blew up, live service has been a thing for a while now. It has certainly had its day in the sun. And for some games, it does work quite well. Not so well for all of them. I mean, images of that Suicide Squad game leaked recently that suggested that was going to be a live service game, and God, my interest in that dropped about 80%. But the thing is with live service games is that they are built to keep you invested for as much as possible for as long as possible. Live service games, like your Fortnites, like your Call of Duties, your Battlefields, whatever, they are built to keep you playing non-stop. Essentially for, those games to be the only game that you play. Trouble is, when all games are built to occupy your every waking thought, it leaves very little time for you to play other stuff. You can't keep up, unless you have unlimited free time, of course, but you can't play all of these all of the time and keep up and unlock all of the skins and all of the, you can't do it. So generally what ends up happening is you have a choice of, okay, I'm either going to be mediocre at a bunch of these games, or I'm going to be great and unlock everything in one of these games. So if you're a developer or a publisher and you're trying to put together your own live service game to throw into the mix, the chances of that game gaining the player base and the popularity to keep it going long term is super slim. Sure, it is free to play and it's very low barrier to entry for anybody to jump in, but if they all kind of jump in for a day or two and don't get hooked, then you're still gaining nothing from them, as opposed to if you had a, kind of like a normal single player release that you'd charge 40, 50, 60, 70 quid for, Like, by the time they discover they're not really into that game, they've already given you their money. So it's a bit of a different business model. Now, I think we are possibly seeing a bit of battle royale fatigue in general, which ties into the live service stuff as well. But I do start to wonder if the combination of people throwing their hat into the live service ring and it not going so well, combined with the economy not being in such a great place and them having to make less bets or safer bets with where they put their money, I wonder if both of those factors could push the snowball down the hill for the end of live service games. Or not the end of them, but everybody who hasn't got a big one is just going to back out and go back to making, your usual standard releases. I'd be really interested to know just how much it costs to run a live service game in comparison to the usual budget that you would put up for a, let's just say, a 20-hour single-player game that you develop and then you just move on from. But with all of the games being shut down this year, I can only assume that it's not cheap. I can also only assume that if you don't get off to a good start, then you're pretty much just dead in the water. Now, me personally, I'm not the biggest fan of the live service model. I do think it stifles creativity in a lot of ways. So again, for me personally, I would obviously love to see a bit of a shift back to what we had before. The problem is, there's no guarantee that we're going back to what we had before. So now the question becomes, what is the next thing? What is the next thing after live service? What is the next thing after Battle Royale? But what I will say with everything that's going on in the industry right now, I wouldn't be surprised if we hear more of these announcements. I wouldn't be surprised if this news of layoffs and things getting shut down just kind of keeps rolling. But it's not looking great if you're putting out a live service game right now. And hopefully with all the great reviews of all the good single player stuff recently, like Hi-Fi Rush and the Harry Potter game and Dead Space, hopefully that kind of spurs people on to get stuck back into those sorts of games again and just put all of their eggs in the single player basket. But we'll see what happens. What do you think? Is this the end? Is live service done? Can we finally say goodbye to the words free to play? Let me know. That's going to be it for this one anyway. I've been Inept Saiyan. You as always have been a wonderful audience, and I hope to catch you next time.